Welcome to the SBI Podcast. You are joining the most watched and listened to show dedicated to B2B revenue growth. My name is Melissa Valdez, the Director of Client Engagement for SBI. Our guest today is Scott Staples, Chief Executive Officer for First Advantage. Scott is a proven executive leader who knows how to generate revenue growth. I hope you enjoy the show. From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to the SBI Podcast, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today, we're going to demonstrate how to create clarity through the entire company by getting everybody laser focused on the real drivers of revenue growth. And we're going to do this through the lens of the CEO. My name is Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. I'm also your host. As always, joining me in the studio is my beloved co-host, Melissa Valdez. Melissa's here to point you to resources to advance you along the way to making your number. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, thank you, Matt, and welcome to our viewers and listeners.
All right, everybody. So joining me on the show today is Scott Staples. So Scott is the CEO for First Advantage. So Scott, first off, thanks for taking the time to spend with us. Welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself and First Advantage to the audience.
Thank you, Matt. My pleasure being here. As you said, I'm Scott Staples. I'm the CEO of First Advantage. I took over as CEO of First Advantage in April of 2017, so I'm just about 8 months on the job. First Advantage is one of the largest background screening companies in the world. Have about 5,000 employees globally. We do business in about 240 different countries, and we make our customers very happy in the fact that we're managing their risk and letting them hire their best talent.
Very good. So, Melissa, Scott and I are going to have a pretty rich discussion on corporate strategy and clarity through the lens of a CEO to drive revenue growth. Maybe you could share with the audience how they might follow along with us.
I can definitely do that. For those of you listening and watching, you can go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook, and there you will download your copy of the How to Make Your Number in 2018 workbook, full of methodologies, tools, and tips helping you to make your number. For this episode, we will be following the corporate strategy section on page 38.
All right, let's jump into the questions. So, Scott, in this first segment, I thought it would be fun for you and I to talk a little bit about this concept of clarity. Right? We're both CEOs. You have a lot more people than I do, but we both need to create clarity. So talk to me about when you first arrived at First Advantage 8 months ago, as you normalized what you were going to do relative to growth. How did you look at organic growth rate of the industry? How did you look at organic growth rate of First Advantage? And did you use that as an input to set markers and an objective for the team?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big believer in, performance-based management, and people can't perform unless they know what the goals are. And the most important goal is growth. And that's really why I was hired. I've got a great background in helping companies grow, and especially global companies. So if we look at our industry, it's not a dramatically high growth industry, especially in the U.S. Typically a 2 to 3% annualized growth in the U.S. And when I came on to First Advantage, we were degrowing at about 2 to 3%. So we obviously needed to stop that slide and put a lot of emphasis on all the things that would take us to start regrowing, which we've done in a relatively short time. But I think the really good thing about our industry is that internationally, there's a lot of potential in growth. I think we're looking probably at an international rate between 9 and 10%. Wow. And that's because the world's getting smaller. And you see it in the news every day, U.S. companies expanding overseas. When they expand overseas, they want to bring their processes and their HR policies abroad. And that includes, doing due diligence on people in the recruiting process and obviously doing a thorough background check. So the fact that we're a global company gives us a really good footing in the future for potentially becoming a high growth organization.
So, Scott, knowing that and knowing that you were hired because you have a track record as a CEO to walk in and reverse a trend or lever up the growth rate, And, the capital structure of First Advantage is that's owned by private equity. So you have a sponsor who has got all kinds of expectations on you. How did you think through which initiatives, in what order, and why, as you thought about, the first 6 months to 12 months in the seat?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have a great, private equity backing with Symphony Technology Group. They're very deep in their understanding of the industry and very helpful in helping us up strategy. But I think, that real high level answer to your question is actually a simple one. We focused on everything that would have impact to our customers. So we started a new sort of process or slogan around the company saying that everything had to be customer first. So we looked at things through the lens of the customer. What was going to make the customer want to do business with us? What was going to make it easier to do business with First Advantage versus our competitors? What did we have to do in terms of solutions, innovation, pricing, et cetera? So thinking of things through the lens of the customer made it really easy for us to put our money where the investments would have payoff on customer impact, as well as making decisions around certain priorities. So it was a simple lens.
Yeah.
Is it right for the customer? Is it going to have customer impact? And then it was obviously something we'd go ahead and do.
So, Scott, knowing that as you thought about customer impact and the measures of them being able to be more successful in their job, were there one or two or three metrics through the eyes of the customer that were their jobs to be done that you guys looked at and said, this is how our customers are actually measuring the outcome from our solution? And then did you take that to your leaders? Like, how did you get there? Because if I'm a CEO listening, I want to connect that and be able to try to follow suit. So can you share some of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm going to start at a very high level and then work down.
Okay.
At a high level, we've come up with a very rigorous process to do consistent NPS scoring.
Yep.
And we do this at a customer by customer level, by a vertical by vertical level. So we know at a very high level what our customers think about us. And then when you start peeling the onion away, there's things in our industry that sort of drive that. One of the biggest things is turnaround time. If you look at the world today, it's a very competitive market for talent. And if customers are taking a long time to hire and onboard their employees, sometimes those employees get fed up and they say, hey, you know what, I got an offer from somewhere else, I'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you have to balance high quality with turnaround time. So we looked at simple metrics about quality, turnaround time, and also the candidate experience. At the end of the day, a company like First Advantage is an extension of our customers. And so we have to make sure that the candidate experience is a very positive one through the screening process. Because if it's not a positive one, it's not a reflection on First Advantage, it's a reflection on the hiring company. And the hiring companies obviously want to avoid that. So we've spent a lot of money, a lot of time coming up with really what I would say industry-leading ways of improving the candidate experience, including things like rolling out mobile apps to do the background screening instead of going through old processes, and eliminating paper, and really coming forward with high innovation that makes our companies, our customers look good to their candidate. So when it came to measurement, it was, okay, what's the NPS score? And then what are the things that drive the NPS score, like turnaround time, candidate experience, stuff like that. And that's where that kind of all falls under that customer first umbrella, which we talked about.
I like the connection. So my last question on this segment, and then we'll take a quick break. How did you gain alignment with your executive team of functional leaders on this change? Because in you walk, right, kind of hired gun CEO. You've got a group of senior folks, right? This is not their first rodeo. Was it hard to get them in the boat? Was there a couple things that you did to get them in there? Like, talk a little bit about that.
So, it's a great question because I love talking about it. When you come into a new situation, you always think, okay, I'm going to have to look at potentially replacing some of the team, coming up with a new go-to-market strategy, whatever it might be. I had to really do none of that. This is a really amazing team that we got from a management standpoint at First Advantage. And when it came to looking at, okay, what was the strategy that we needed to grow the company, it literally took us 3 weeks to put it in place because it was so evident and so clear amongst all the management team. So anytime I talked to somebody, it would always say, here's what I think we should do, blah, 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 blah. And it came down that everybody was saying the same thing. So in the early days, I kind of felt that my job at CEO was almost like sort of as a quarterback, almost that as a project manager, just getting everybody on the same page and starting to execute. So I think a couple of things that I do to really make the strategy drive forward was a real high level of communication. I believe in over communicating. So that's not only with the management team, but with all the employees. I started a Scott Unplugged email announcement that goes out on a regular basis just to keep everybody on the same page and understanding of what we're going to do.
I like that.
So communication was a big piece of it. And then the other piece of it was coming up with a review cadence that made sense. I always feel that if you're not reviewing something, it doesn't get done. So we came up with a pretty structured review process. I've got a weekly staff meeting. I've got things that we do on a structured weekly basis that have really enabled us to move the ball forward. And then I think probably the most surprising thing to you is that I've really pushed the management team out to the field. I want, being a customer-first organization, I've always felt in my entire career that all the great answers, all the great ideas, all the issues will be told to you by your customer.
Yeah.
But you won't know this if you're not out meeting them. So one of the big initiatives that I put in place was making sure that we're in front of our customers on a regular basis. And that has really helped because one, they validated our strategy. Two, they've given us insights into what innovation they're looking for. Three, they give us competitive insights, which is also important for us, and just sort of general market overview. So I feel that we've really become a transformed company from internally focused to externally focused, and that's made all the difference.
Well, that's a great answer and some really good tips relative to the CEOs that are listening in. That what Scott did. A couple things you take away from that is, if you're going to be maniacal about customers, it's got to go all the way through the organization. It can't just be something that you say and then executives say that's what they do versus that's what we do. So I love that connectivity. I think, Scott, another takeaway, the candidate experience and you putting yourself actually in the shoes of the clients using your product and thinking about how they feel because they're competing to hire great people. And to think you would lose somebody towards the end because they had this awful experience. That's a great insight. So, Melissa, I know you've got a tool to share. Scott and I are going to take a quick break, so I will pass it over to you.
Yes, absolutely. So those of you listening and watching might wonder how your corporate strategy measures up against the emerging best practices of market leaders. Well, SBI has a tool just for you. It is the Revenue Growth Diagnostic, and it's a web-based self-assessment that you can spend 10 to 15 minutes answering some questions and see where you measure up against those emerging best practices. To find this tool, you'll go to sbi.tips/revenue growth diagnostic.
All right, you're listening to the SBI podcast. I'm your host, Matt Shares, and today's guest is Scott Staples. Scott's the CEO for First Advantage. And today, Scott and I are demonstrating this concept of creating clarity through the entire company as the CEO by getting everybody laser focused on real drivers of revenue growth. We're going to jump back into the questions, and in the second segment, we're going to talk a little bit about go-to-market. So, Scott, as you walked in and you looked at the existing coverage model, did you have a sense that the portion of the market with the highest growth potential had the most amount of resources and the portion with the lowest penetration? Like, how did you balance the go-get versus do I have my resources directed maybe at lower growth markets? And how fast were you able to get a sense of that?
Yeah, I think I got a sense of it pretty quickly. But I think, the one thing that I quickly learned about this industry in this market, it's not homogenous. So you actually need multiple go-to-market strategies. One of the very first things that I pushed forward was to verticalize the company. I felt that in order to get true innovation, in order to really understand the growth opportunities and the pain points with our customers, we had to understand the industries we're in. So we've completely verticalized the company around 6 main industries, launching a 7th next year. So I think that has made a big difference. And I also think size of company was important for us to take a look at. One of the strategies that we put in place with our smaller business segment to move them to a more self-service model. So driving products and solutions that they can, pretty much sign up for on their own with standard packages, really kind of lowering our cost of sales model there so that we could take that money and that manpower and put them on, the larger customers who need a little bit more handhold. So it's completely a matrix, go-to-market strategy, with verticals, with size segments, even the geographies are different. We don't treat our APAC region as our APAC region. There's literally 9 or 10 sub-regions within APAC, and the same thing with EMEA. We really kind of, our go-to-market strategy in the UK is very different than our go-to-market strategy in the DACH countries and Benelux and whatever. So I think it was a matter of understanding that it was very highly matrixed market and then figuring out go-to-market strategies for each matrix.
So Scott, knowing that, and you got very purposeful, right, about allocation, and just as you were rattling off all these decisions you made, you can see how closely aligned you are to market opportunity. Did you think about any innovative routes to market that you could implement that would result in a revenue lift, or are you maybe prosecuting those now as we head into 2018?
Yeah, I mean, there's some things you can do and some things you can't do. One of the handcuffs that we've got in our industry is that it's a federally regulated industry. So you're providing, credit reports and background reports with sensitive data. So it's a very highly regulated industry. So it's not like you can offload a lot of the sales responsibility to third parties because, First Advantage has to own that due to our commitments to the federal government. But there are certain go-to-market strategies that we look at in order to drive more leads. So, for example, partnering with HRIS systems and players in the market, especially in the smaller business segment, to drive leads to us and to really improve what I'd call the top of the pipeline. But the bottom of the pipeline still needs a First Advantage handholder to take it to final closure due to some of the regulations that we're under. But I think the real innovative differentiator for us in this space is all around our technology. There's a lot of different angles you could look at to work with third parties to try to drive market share for you, but at the end of the day, having the best technology and the best solutions is the best door opener for you. So we are spending a lot of money and putting a lot of effort around really taking our products and solutions to the front of the market. And I feel today, that we are the market leader on technology, and even 2018, we're going to, increase our investment in that. Today we've got, pretty good market share. About half of the Fortune 100 companies use us today. About a third of the Global 500 use us today. So we've got a pretty good, market share today. But to expand that customer base and to bring on new customers, really the innovation has to be on the product side.
Right. So that probably leads into my last question on this segment, and I don't want to lead the witness. Is there an opportunity to increase customer lifetime value by routing certain products or customers through alternative sales channels?
I don't know about alternative sales channels, but I think there's an opportunity to increase and elongate the customer life cycle through different and new offerings. I think it's one thing to be a company that does, screening and drug checks and things like that. But our customers are starting to ask us, what else can you do for us in the pre-employment space? So there's a lot of things that we're looking at to expand our services, like getting into behavioral assessments and talent assessments and things like that. So that if someone comes to us and says, yeah, they're screened for their education, we verified their past employment, they've passed all the criminal checks, they passed all the drug checks, and oh, by the way, we've done a behavioral assessment on them and they ranked really high, and we've done a talent assessment on whatever talent they're looking for, and they passed that. They become a very hireable candidate.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to turnaround time. So if we could then, get them through the process with our customers a lot faster, then we've really helped our customers, differentiate in the market, as they compete for talent. So I don't think it's about alternative sales channels. I think it's about getting into, different areas of the business.
Scott, I resonate with that as I think about, in our almost 12-year history as a firm, we'd spent so much time in doing sales and marketing projects. And as you articulated, offerings versus sales channels, something that we sort of got dragged into by our customers, and I say drag with a smile on my face, was pricing and packaging, because the launching of new products and how to price them was such a critical thing to our clients' growing revenue. And for the first 7 years we were around, we didn't do that. So as I listened to you talk about that, it was like a light bulb was going off in my head as I thought about even just the experience of your client, if they're doing it screening. Yeah, I mean, you guys doing talent assessments, helping with reference checks. I mean, there's all this other stuff that's right around that candidate experience that's a value add, because the cost of a mishire is so significant that somebody's really looking at you to be that value-added partner.
Spot on.
Very good. All right, so great session, great segment. Scott and I are going to take one more break. Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I think you've got something to share with the audience.
Yes, I do. If any of you out there are inspired by Scott's corporate strategy, you don't have to go at it alone. SBI's team of experts is here to help. Consider spending time in an interactive workshop with one of our subject matter experts, and we would be thrilled to host you down here in Dallas, Texas at the studio, our fabulous executive briefing center. You have to come see it for yourself to believe your eyes. But to get a feel for what's covered in these workshops, go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook.
All right, we're here with Scott Staples, the CEO for First Advantage, and Scott and I are in our last segment, and we're talking about clarity relative to corporate strategy and driving the real levers that pull revenue growth. So Scott, this last section, you and I are going to talk about customer success, which I would tell you, if I think about phone calls from your peers that are CEOs, especially in private equity-owned companies, and thinking about enterprise value and churn mitigation, customer success and client experience, I should have one of those easy buttons on my desk, because that's a hot topic that your peers are wrestling with. It's well known in software, but in tech-enabled services and other industries, customer success is making its way in. So I know you undertook that as a major initiative. Question for you that you could share with the audience: how did you determine where within First Advantage to position customer success?
Yeah, and again, we really have to thank SBI for your help in this area.
Thank you.
But I think it was easy, because if you think about what I said in the very beginning about customer first.
Yep.
So we position customer success internally where it would get the most attention, and externally where it would have the most impact. So customer first has really been elevated, within our organization, and really being seen as, the most important function, because as you said, it takes a lot of money, effort, and time to bring on customers, and it's painful to lose customers. And First Advantage right now is in a very enviable point of our journey, in that our customer retention is extremely high, and I think it's because of all the hand-holding that we've done for the customers and all the innovative products that we're rolling out. So customer success, is getting all the focus right now in the company, and deservedly so.
So on that topic of customer success, do you have expectations relative to certain metrics that you're expecting out of the team, and what have been some of the early lifts or early returns that you would point to, either behavioral-based, indicator-based, churn, et cetera? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think there's some practical ones and even pragmatic ones, and I think there's some high-level ones. So again, NPS score would be our real defining goal for how happy is a customer. But there's obviously other things that go into it. Is a customer success manager increasing revenue? Is a customer success manager decreasing churn? Is retention improving? There's a lot of things that we're starting to measure, but there's also some real easy ones, like when's the last time you visited them? We're starting to look at calendars. Customers that get visited a lot, tend to, build better relationships with you, tell you, more information. But again, this goes back to what I said earlier about sort of pushing the company out to the field.
Yeah.
We're just really demanding that we're in front of our customers a lot more. And I'll give you sort of my informal metric of how to judge customer success manager. I always felt that the best way to view the impact of customer success manager is kind of picture how that person is operating at our customer on a given day.
Yep.
And our buyer would be potentially chief of human resources or head of talent management, or even a head of risk management, at some of our larger customers. And I always say, okay, when that person is walking down the hallway in their office and they see our customer success manager coming the other way, what goes through their head? Do they say, okay, here comes the sales guy from First Advantage, and that person's going to try to sell me on a new something that they've rolled out? Right. That's not what we want. What we want that person to say is, oh, here comes the customer success manager from First Advantage. That person is really my trusted advisor on what's going on with state regulations or compliance or changing laws or anything in the background screening or drug testing environment. And I want to talk to that person about X, Y, and Z because I know that person is a subject matter. That's what we're trying to get at in terms of what I would call informally measuring how well we're doing in customer success.
Got it. All right. So last question for you in this segment, and your insights have been great. So many of your peers are not as far along as you on the journey with customer success. So Scott, as you reflect, maybe what are the one or two biggest things that you've learned about implementing customer success into a tech-enabled services organization, into your company that you wish you knew from the onset?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there's two things. One is any transformation that involves people, has a human element to it, is going to take longer than you thought. There's just a lot there's a lot of moving parts. There's structural, there's organizational, there's emotional. There's a lot of things that go into a transformation of customer success. So anytime you're dealing with a human element, just plan on it taking a little longer. Yeah. That's okay as long as you get it right. And the other thing is, I don't think you have to have it all nailed down to get started. What's most important is starting the journey. The first step is usually the hardest one, but it's better to take it early and then to change course versus wait till you think you've got it fully baked down and then start. Because you'll be a year later and things change. Our industry changes dramatically every quarter, even every month. So just get started, I'd say is my best piece of advice.
Yeah, and I think your and the reason I'm smiling is your thought and reminder about patience. I run a firm that's full of human beings, and sometimes you just got to remember the emotional narrative and where everybody is as you continue to drive the organization forward. So I think you nailed that. So Scott, can't thank you enough for spending some time with us and giving a lot of insight in a short amount of time to the audience. So really appreciate you spending time with us.
My pleasure, Matt. Thank you.
And audience members and viewers, I thank you for your continued support. I know you have a choice on where you put your eyes and your ears on a given week and who you listen to. So the fact that you would be part of the SBI community and spend some of that time with Melissa and myself and Scott today, I really appreciate you for that. Before we go, Melissa's got one more thing to share with you.
Yes, for those of you out there listening and watching, I invite you to become a part of SBI's body of knowledge and become a part of our community. We film about 50 podcasts per year, and we feature various guests, but we don't know everybody out there. So if you have a compelling story to talk to our audience about, and Matt and myself, I'd love to hear from you. You can look me up on LinkedIn. My name is Melissa Valdez.
All right, that's it for today, everybody. As always, until next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.